G'day riders, quite excited. Rel and I have finally got a bit of a workshop together for metal fabrication. Some of you may remember a little while ago, in fact it was last winter, we got alongside an engineer friend of ours. He gave us some tuition and pointers on fabrication and welding. So we've finally got a welding rig together, as well as some other workshop bits and pieces like a bench vise and an anvil, which is really exciting, which means that we can work on small fabrication projects here at our own home. Rel has changed jobs recently, which means that her hours are and sometimes a lot different than mine. What that does mean is that I have had to find a small project to get on with myself, and I'm going to show you what that is. Another engineer friend of ours allowed me to pick through his scrap bin. I came home with different kinds of things, some box section, just stuff that I could practice welding and cutting, shaping, that sort of thing. The first little project that I'm going to do, I'm going to build a Sissy bar that features a sword through the middle of it. And I've taken these scrap metal pieces, cut them to shape as best I can, ready for grinding and sanding. Taken different things here, flat pieces of sheet metal, some rod, and also this piece of box section which I've sliced down the middle and bent, which is then going to form the handle, and this part will slide into that gap and then be welded together, and then this piece welded to that. That's the intention anyway, so quite a bit of work to do here. I've just been working on an end cap for the handle here, the hilt. Also cut out a bit of box section which will go on here just to cap it off. It's a little bit smaller than the handle width. Cut some V-sections in the top of it and then bent them over to create a little pyramid shape on the top, and I'll weld and polish those up. Here's a first pass with some 80 grit grinder. Just got all that paint and rust off the steel. Next step, place some weld in those gaps and then round that off. The idea is for this to sit within a Sissy bar. I'm pretty proud of how this little end cap has worked out. I welded the seams. There's a few holes, so I filled those with some more weld and then just ground those down. And I'd say that's pretty successful. I've just welded the pommel to the hilt and the blade to the guard. Probably don't want to look too closely, but for a relatively new welder I'm quite pleased. Bit of spatter, it's definitely starting to take shape. You can see how the sword shape is going to fit together. By cutting and bending that box section, it creates a bit of a gap that will create the handle as it slides onto the blade there, and that'll be the next job, fitting that and then welding that on. Well, there it is, a whole sword, all the pieces welded together. Just a matter now of tidying things up. I've basically put it together just using my eye to keep things straight, and I think it's come up quite well. Really loving the home built look. Not too perfect, love it. Let's tidy it up. There it is, the sword is together. Pretty proud of that really. Got a lot of work to do on my finishing and really finessing those welds, but in terms of creating what I set out to create, I'm really pleased with the result. The next idea will be to get some wire to wrap around the handle to give the impression of leather, and then obviously the next process is to get some rod and create the Sissy bar shape that this sword will sit in. Next stage in the project is to give this sword handle a bit of life here, and I've got some 2mm wire that I'm going to wrap around this handle, hopefully in a bit of a nice pattern, so we'll see how that goes. I tested out the look of simply winding this wire around the handle, but it just didn't do it for me. So I'm now experimenting with creating some barbed wire, obviously blunt. I'm going to experiment with wrapping this kind of loosely around the handle just to give it a unique look. Watch this space. So there's my barbed wire, basically just putting 2 pieces of wire into a drill, holding one end in the vise and then running the drill which twisted the wire. Now I've just wound up welding the little barbs onto this wire. My thought is possibly, because there is a decent length there, to maybe twist it around the whole sword. Alright, there it is. Faux barbed wire. I just think it looks really cool. Barbed wire and swords. Heavy frickin' metal. Here's the basic layout of the Sissy bar. The sword will be welded into this part here, and there will likely be a support bracket here, and I'm going to leave the length of the Sissy bar undetermined at this point because this isn't going on a bike at this stage. It'll be good just to leave that length so that if and when it finally does get fitted to a bike, there's plenty of length to work with in terms of cutting to size. Here is the first bar welded on to the sword. Some of these welds are ugly. Fairly strong, but freaking ugly. Some of them are probably what I call panicked welds or panicky welds. I'm sure if you've ever learned how to weld, you probably know what I mean by that. I start the weld, then kind of lose my place and hope for the best. It was, yeah, not my finest hour. Nevertheless, here we are. One side of the Sissy bar attached. I have both bars welded on now, and after quite a bit of grinding, they look passable. It's funny, this project, there's some elements that I know I need a lot of work on, but there's also some parts of it that have really made me proud. For instance, I don't know if you're going to be able to tell, both the sword and the bars are very symmetrical, so I don't know if you can see it here. They don't look out of place. One doesn't look like it's shooting off on a different angle. Really pleased with how I've done that just by using my eye. Next step is putting a cross brace just in here somewhere. I just wanted to show you this. I'm sure I'm not the first person to ever do this. This is how I'm going to fold the ends of this piece of box section. Just going to crimp them together to bring them to a point. So I've just removed the metal from 2 sides in a V shape, top and bottom, and I will basically just squeeze them together in a vise to create the point shape. And there you can see the ends crimped together. I had to give one side a bit of a nudge with the hammer on the anvil there because they weren't coming together evenly, and I'll just give these ends a bit more of a squeeze in the vise, and then when they're nice and close together, I'll just weld up, across and down the back, and then grind those nice and smooth, hopefully. There's my cross brace, nice and solid, still warm from the grinding and welding. The next step will be to attach this cross brace to these bars. Now what I'm going to look at doing is actually grinding down into this round bar here and cutting out a wee notch for this box section to sit in, and then filling and welding any gaps. I feel like it will add some strength to it that it wouldn't otherwise have if I just simply welded that to the bars. Let's see how it goes. So I've got the crossbar tacked in place for a second time actually, because when the first time I put it on, it was way uneven. So I've had to literally cut it back off and realign it. Again, just another one of those learning things really. I'm no worse for it. It's given me experience and really given me a lesson to, I guess, measure twice and cut once. You can see I'm going to have to fill quite a lot there. I filled the gaps and ground down the weld. I'm going to leave the bar there for now. It's taken on quite a grungy custom look as I've created it. which often happens with anything that I create. I tend to believe that something, just like people, I guess, are the sum total of their experiences. So if there's, say for instance, a little grind or a little cutting disc mark in the metal, I quite like that. But this isn't going on a bike right now. This is going to be a touchstone project for me to probably just see where I've come from in terms of fabrication and welding. Very amateur welding here, but it's a starting point, and I'll be able to look at it and, as I say, just know where I've come from. Really just a custom piece ready for a bike. So what I'm going to do now is give you guys some vanity shots of the barbed wire sword Sissy bar.